You know the drill, smash that like button until it gives up, and hit subscribe because trust me, we're just getting warmed up here. So, get this, our guy, a genius inventor, accidentally logs himself out of his own life and takes an unplanned trip back to the past. Yeah, like actual time travel. He winds up in ancient Korea, smack dab in the middle of the Joseon dynasty. What's worse, he's stuck living as the crown prince of all people. And trust me, this kid's not about to sit still. He starts hacking the system, using all his futuristic technology to flip the kingdom upside down. Picture this. While other nations are still burning oil lamps, his palace is lit up like Vegas with electric lights. Horses? His country's already got trains. And those fabric-armored losers coming at him in battle? Yeah, they're about to meet his six-barrel guns and iron-armored soldiers. Every single shot drops a fool, and suddenly the battlefield looks like a one-sided massacre. Now meet Kim Jin-ho, the boy genius turned 9-year-old crown prince, who's about to make the whole world look like amateur hour. The kid's been inventing since middle school steam engines, iron armor, you name it. By high school, he was building human-powered planes that didn't even need fuel. And don't get me started on his toy gun, a weird little thing that packed more punch than the real deal, landing him in hot water with the Royal Army on more than one occasion. Then fate takes a swing and earthquake hits. Jin-ho fumbles with some explosive materials, and bam, one-way ticket to the past. He wakes up in the body of a newborn, but not just any kid. His new life? Luxury, baby. Turns out this family's got serious money and power. His dad's not just some noble either. He's the crown prince, future king of Ozen. Talk about being born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Jin-ho's no dummy, though. He realizes quick that being crown prince means he can make some real moves. And while most royal kids are just learning how to talk, this guy's mentally over 30 and ready to take on the world. His first trick: skip all those boring royal lessons by impressing his dad, King Sayoung the Great. Yep, the same king known for supporting geniuses. Jin-ho rounds up the kingdom's best craftsmen and starts teaching them some critical skills from the future. Why? So he can sit back and reap all the benefits while everyone else does the hard work. But before all that, Jin-ho's got another problem to tackle. Palace hygiene is absolute garbage. One day, he's walking through the gardens when he smells something foul. Turns out, one of the palace maids straight up stepped in a pile of dung. Disgusted, he realizes ancient folks haven't exactly mastered the concept of cleanliness, and he's not about to let it slide. He calls out the mess and shuts down the palace's old-school teachers when they try to argue with him. Yeah, this modern-day kid has zero patience for their outdated ideas. But Jin-ho doesn't stop there. He starts questioning the kingdom's military tactics too, like, why are they still using horses and fabric armor when they could be way ahead of the game? His teachers, they're floundering, unable to keep up with his sharp logic. Soon enough, the palace scholars realize this kid's on another level, so they up the ante, throwing harder subjects his way. The plan? Slow him down. But come on, this is Jin-ho we're talking about. Time flies, and by the age of 7, Jin-ho's officially crowned as the crown prince. Sure, he's got the title, but the kid still doesn't have any real power yet. No worries, though, because he's already plotting his next big move. He's moving the whole dynasty into the future, one genius invention at a time. While strolling around the palace, he finds himself fascinated by the blacksmiths, watching them hammer out swords and shields. Ah, the smell of hot iron. He thinks, reminds me of home. So he strikes up a chat with the lead blacksmith, asking, hey, who's your best guy with steel and gold? The blacksmith, taken aback by the sudden question, replies, I've got someone, your highness. He sketches out a blueprint for a new pen that not only writes but holds ink inside. So no more messy ink pots. The blacksmith's confused but intrigued. You want me to make what? Jin-ho explains the whole concept like it's no big deal. Trust me, it'll work. I need this thing to release ink smoothly, but not too much. Oh, and make the tip rounded so it doesn't flood the paper. You'll need to make a lot of these pens and fast, not over the course of a month. Since the pen tips will touch water, we'll use gold and silver instead of iron to prevent rust. We can hammer thin sheets and, if we get the molds right, crank out 20 pens a day. The blacksmith pointed to the drawing. The main issue is the slit, right? Jin-ho agreed, nodding. The line should be as thin as a strand of hair. Think mechanical pencil tip about 0.5 millimeters should do. After some quick calculations, the blacksmith said, Then I'll make the slit about 1 GI wide. Jinho's pumped. If you can pull this off, we're about to change how writing gets done around here. 3 days later, right on schedule, the blacksmith returned with the finished product. I've made 5 nibs, each with different line thicknesses. Please test them and choose the one you like best. Jinho attached a nib to the pen body, dipped it into ink, and made a stroke across the paper. As the pen glides over the paper, leaving a fine, elegant line, far exceeding his expectations, he couldn't hide his grin. "I love it," he said, as the 2 craftsmen stood by, stunned by their own handiwork. "You did a fantastic job," Hurong praised, smiling with satisfaction. "It's all thanks to your guidance, Your Highness," the blacksmith replied, humble as always. After testing the nibs, Hurong gave his order. "Make 100 more with this line thickness, and keep 10 of them in perfect condition." The blacksmith nodded immediately. "Of course, Your Highness." "Oh, and one more thing," Hurong added, a glint in his eye. "Can you engrave plum blossoms on the nib of this gold pen?" Without a second's hesitation, the blacksmith replied, "Certainly, Your Highness." Hurong, excited, asked, "How long will that take?" The blacksmith confidently responded, "Just 10 days should do." Hurong, ever cautious, reminded him, "I'll give you 2 extra days, but there better not be any defects. I'm introducing this to my father." The blacksmith, Gong, bowed deeply. "I swear, there will be no defects, Your Highness." "And one more thing," Hurong added, lowering his voice. "Keep this project under wraps until I show it to my father." "As you command, Your Highness," Gong replied without hesitation. Once their business was done, Hurong left, and Li Changhe, watching from the sidelines, couldn't help but remark, "His Highness is truly mature for his age." Gong nodded in agreement. "Yes, I've heard he's only just turned 8 this year, but the way he speaks and acts, it's like talking to someone in their 30s. Li Changhe grinned. "That aside, you must be realizing how great it is to be the best craftsman in Ozen now, huh?" Turns out, Gong had received a certificate of recognition personally awarded by Crown Prince Hurong, and he cherished it like it was pure gold. "I need to find a carpenter to make the best frame for this," Gong mused. "This is definitely something to pass down as a family heirloom." Days later, the nibs were completed, each intricately engraved with plum blossoms. When Emperor Young Nyan tried the pen, his reaction said it all. "This is truly remarkable," he said, admiration clear on his face. 10 out of 10. In the 3rd year of Saiyong's reign, Hurong introduced the golden pen to the emperor, who, after testing it, couldn't stop praising it. "The wrist and arm feel so comfortable when writing with this pen," he marveled. "And even when writing quickly, it's beautiful. The Crown Prince has done something truly admirable." Hurong, staying humble, responded, "You're too kind, father." But the emperor wasn't done. "Historians must record this moment," he declared. The historian bowed deeply. "Yes, Your Majesty." The emperor gazed at the pen for a long while. "You've truly done something remarkable, Crown Prince." Then something caught his eye. "Is this a plum blossom?" he asked. Hurong quickly explained, "Yes, father. I had it engraved because it's the symbol of the royal family." The emperor's pride only grew. "Excellent. But tell me, how did you come up with this invention?" "Here it comes," Hurong thought, already prepared. "Well, one day when you were dipping your brush into the ink, I noticed something strange," he began, working his wits. "Strange?" The emperor raised an eyebrow. "Yes," Hurong continued. "The ink was absorbed by the bristles of the brush. Normally, water flows downward, but I saw the opposite. I couldn't help but be fascinated by it. And so, I set out to make this." The emperor was impressed. "Many have used brushes, but no one has thought like you. This is learning through observation at its finest." Hurong, seizing the moment, said, "Thank you for your kind words, father, but I do have a request." "Speak your mind," the emperor encouraged. "Eunuch," Hurong called. "Bring them here." The eunuch appeared, carrying a mysterious box. "Yes, Crown Prince." Hurong turned to the emperor. "Father, I'd like you to grant these gold pens to the historians and court ministers." The emperor, intrigued, asked, "All of these pens?" Hurong explained his plan. "The ministers and officials who need to write quickly should have these, and the historians, who record everything tirelessly, could use something to make their work easier. The room buzzed with surprise. No one had ever thought to consider the needs of the historians before. The emperor asked for everyone's thoughts. I believe the crown prince's idea is excellent. What do you all think? He asked. The ministers all nodded in agreement. For someone so young to be thinking about the well-being of his officials, it's truly admirable, they said. Finally, the emperor gave his approval. Distribute the gold pens to the historians and court officials, he ordered. The servants moved quickly. Yes, your majesty. The whole court was filled with happiness, and the emperor couldn't stop smiling. The crown prince truly has deep thoughts, they remarked, as Hurong basked in his success. Not long after, the golden pen Hurong created sparked a trend in Yoshin. By the third year of Sai Young's reign, everyone was talking about the golden nib pen. Have you tried the crown prince's pen? They asked. Oh yeah, it's brilliant. Merchants buzzed with excitement. In the markets, deals were happening left and right, with customers testing the pens. This golden nib pen is something else, one said, writing with it effortlessly. The shopkeeper grinned. The emperor himself promoted this beauty, plum blossom engraving and all. It's gorgeous, the customer added, admiring it. And it's so convenient. The shopkeeper, watching the customer leave, thought to himself, I smell profit in the air. But not all was smooth sailing. A few days later, during a court session, a minister reported, Your Majesty, there's been an unfortunate incident in the market. The emperor raised an eyebrow. Unfortunate? Speak. Counterfeit golden nib pens are being sold everywhere, the minister explained. The court erupted in outrage. How dare they forge such a valuable item, especially one bearing the royal symbol? Punishment must be severe, the officials roared. The emperor, thinking of Hurong, said, Let's consult the crown prince. He invented the pen after all. The eunuch called out, Summon the crown prince. A short while later, Hurong arrived. Father, you called? The emperor got right to it. The ministers say counterfeit pens must be severely punished. What are your thoughts, my son? Hurong bowed, furrowed his brow, and took a moment to think. All eyes were on him, waiting for his answer. Finally, Hurong spoke. Father, may I handle this matter? 1 month later, the crown prince made his move. He walked into the Ministry of Revenue holding up a pen. Everyone knelt down, bowing in unison. Your Highness, we greet the crown prince. Here's your rewrite using voice 1 at 75%, keeping it sharp, engaging, and with a bit of tension. One of the officials caught sight of it and immediately went pale. His face drained of color. No one dared to raise their heads. None of us would ever allow our guilds to commit such treachery, one of them blurted out. Another chimed in. My guild would never do such a thing. Hyung glanced at them, his expression cold. I didn't come here to accuse you. Stand up. Sweat dripped down their faces as their bodies trembled. Hyung's hand slammed down on the table with a sharp crack. His tone dropped, dark and commanding. Don't make me repeat myself. Stand up. Now. The officials, regaining their composure, shakily rose to their feet. Hyung sat down, speaking with authority. Let me cut to the chase. I plan to grant the production rights for golden nib pens and regular pens to one of your guilds. However, those producing golden nib pens will pay 20% of the profits to the court. Oh, and the market price for these pens cannot exceed 60% above production costs. One official, clearly nervous, spoke up hesitantly. Your Highness, forgive me, but there's a problem. A 60% margin sounds like a lot, but after wages for the makers and sellers, we're left with only 30%. If the court takes 20%, we're down to just 10%. Hyung's hand slammed the table again, his face darkening. Are you trying to lie to my face? The official's mouth snapped shut, fear written across his face. I said 20% of the 30% profit, which leaves you around 6%, not 10%. Hyung spat. Get this deceitful, money-blinded fool out of my sight, and revoke his guild's bidding rights. The man froze, stammering. Your Highness, please, I beg you. But his pleas fell on deaf ears as 2 soldiers dragged him out, ignoring his cries for mercy. The room was plunged into heavy silence, tension thick in the air. No one dared utter a single word. Hyung spoke again, his tone sharp but steady. Both His Majesty and I believe that the merchants and common folk of Ozen are vital. No one can achieve anything alone. Everyone needs help in life. He stood abruptly, his voice rising. "But if any of you dare lie to me like that fool did, then you merchants will be worth nothing." The officials bowed deeply, speaking in unison. "We will remember, Your Highness." With his point made crystal clear, the bidding process concluded without further scheming. Hyung, feeling a sly satisfaction curling at the corner of his mouth, called for his eunuch to meet him in private. "You've done well," Hyung said with a smile. "Your Highness, I wouldn't dare," the eunuch replied, a little puzzled. "But why all this, Your Highness?" Hyung sighed. "You know, I'm still too young. I don't have many other choices." The eunuch nodded in understanding. "Indeed. Well then, with your permission, I'll take my leave." "Go ahead," Hyung replied, though inside, he was glowing with satisfaction. "Good. Very good. Everything is going smoothly. Just keep it up." One day, however, an official suddenly spoke up during court. "Your Highness, I, Grand Chamberlain Sung have something to report," he said sternly. The emperor raised an eyebrow. "Speak." Sung-um's voice was firm. "We can no longer proceed with the crown prince's plan." This was the first time Hyung had faced such blatant opposition. He turned to face the man, narrowing his eyes. Sung-um continued, "Your Majesty, since the crown prince's ascension, there's been nothing but praise for him. The treasury has grown, thanks to his initiatives, especially since the sale of the golden nib pens. Revenues are higher than ever before. The ministers have been overjoyed with the financial success." The emperor nodded in agreement. "But," Sung-um added, "some of us are concerned. The court is showing too much favor to the merchants. How can the court become a place of business? The merchants may end up as the lowest class in society. But if we give them too much power, they'll think they can influence the throne." Hyung stood there listening carefully. But before the conspirators could make any further moves, tragedy struck. The emperor's father, Grand King Taejong, passed away on May 10th in the 4th year of Sejong's reign. The conspirators had to put their plans on hold. "We'll have to wait for the next opportunity," one of them murmured, and the rest nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Hyung threw himself into his studies, day and night. Books from Europe filtered through China into his hands. With his hands on his hips, a confident smile played on his face. "This should fuel my inspiration. But I can't claim all these ideas as mine, they'll grow suspicious." Hyung's face darkened. "I need to learn how to deceive them better." During a formal presentation, Hyung explained to the court, "That's why I believe we should adopt Indian numerals, what the Westerners call Arabic numerals. They would make calculations far more convenient." The Minister of Revenue, Kim Young, nodded after a moment of consideration. "I believe the Crown Prince is right. Indian numerals are indeed useful for numbers." Minister of Rights Hyo-do agreed as well. "I concur." With the agreement of the key ministries, the emperor made his decision. "Let the nation begin using Indian numerals starting next month. If the results are favorable, we will implement them nationwide." The court responded in unison, "We obey, Your Majesty." A short while later, the emperor rubbed his temples, clearly tired. "Crown Prince, I think you should hear this next matter," he said, gesturing for Hyung to step forward. Hyung, confused, stepped closer. "Yes, father," the emperor sighed, holding a letter. "The Emperor of Ming has sent word. He was very pleased with the golden nib pens and has requested an additional 10,000 as tribute." Hyung's mind whirred. The royal treasury wasn't exactly in great shape. But then an idea struck him. "Father, what if the court established its own guild?" The ministers were stunned. "A guild? How could that be?" Minister of Rights Hyun protested. The emperor motioned for silence. "The crown prince has more to say. Continue." Hyung explained. "Since the Emperor of Ming has requested more pens, it's clear they are popular. With the vast population of the Ming dynasty, the number of literate people there must be many times greater than our own. If we establish a royal guild to control the production, we could meet this demand efficiently." The court was silent as Hyung laid out his plan. The emperor, impressed, nodded. "Let us proceed. A righteous king should live as simply as his people, finding joy in humility and building virtue." Hyun's voice rose in frustration. "Are you saying we should take pride in poverty? Have you seen any commoners who want to live in poverty and call it virtuous? They are suffering. In the summer, they're scorched by drought. In the winter, they freeze. And in the spring, they starve. Do you think they'll praise the king's virtue while they die? Heian took a breath, then said, Father, the nobles and ministers may understand how to endure hunger, but the commoners do not. They lack the knowledge or the means. If we wish to educate them, we must first lessen their suffering. Don't you agree? The emperor slammed the table again. Exactly. The court watched in stunned silence as the emperor's passion matched Heian's. Heian thought to himself, my father's getting a little too worked up. Time to stop. Heian spoke again, calming the room. Throughout history, it's been said that the will of the people is the will of the heavens. Even if we maintain our virtues, what will the gods think of us if the people are crying out in misery? The people say, man proposes, God disposes. After we've done everything in our power, shouldn't we wait to see how the gods respond? Yet, whenever a drought or plague strikes, the ministers blame the king, claiming he's lost his virtue. Isn't that a contradiction? Heian addressed the entire court. Many of you have been officials since before this dynasty was founded. So, why didn't you accuse King Taejo of losing his virtue when he established this dynasty while still a subject of the Goryeo kingdom? Or when my grandfather, King Taejong, raised his sword against his brothers? Or my father, did he lose his virtue when he took the throne instead of his elder brother, the rightful heir? At this, Grand Minister Sung cried out in panic. Your Highness, Crown Prince, we didn't mean. The emperor raised his hand, silencing the court. The Crown Prince's words were harsh, but true. I hope the ministers will forgive him. He turned to Heian. Next time, be more careful with your words. Heian bowed deeply. I will, father. The emperor turned back to the ministers. But listen closely. The well-being of the people is the most important thing. The tribute to the Ming emperor will proceed as the Crown Prince has planned. Everyone in the court bowed their heads in compliance. Yes, your majesty. The emperor glanced at Heian. Do you have anything more to add, Crown Prince? I believe it's more reasonable to pay the people with food for their labor, rather than just handing out supplies, Heian said, his voice steady. The emperor blinked, surprised. Pay them, you say? Heian dove into the details. Yes, while the lack of rain causes droughts, the absence of irrigation systems and water reservoirs is just as big of a problem. We need to prepare for future droughts by building reservoirs in every town and repairing the ones we already have. And I think we can mobilize the people to do this work, paying them in food. When King Sung's decree to send golden nib pens as tribute to Emperor Yongle was issued, a problem arose during preparations. What did you say? The emperor asked, his tone sharp. They can't meet the production deadline? A court official stepped forward nervously. Forgive me, your majesty, but the merchant guild responsible for producing the golden nib pens has reported they can't meet the production quota in time. Jinho, deep in thought, wasn't surprised. As I expected, with the current state of our workshops, it's impossible to meet that deadline. He stepped forward. Father, may I confirm something? Could I summon the representative of that merchant guild? Soong immediately interjected, his voice sharp. This cannot be allowed. How could we summon a mere merchant to discuss state affairs? The emperor, calm but firm, responded, Grand Secretary, you knew what my answer would be. That's why you dared interrupt me, isn't it? Realizing he had overstepped, Soong stammered, Your Majesty, But the emperor wasn't having it. I understand your loyalty, Grand Secretary, but instead of blindly rejecting everything, why don't you suggest an alternative solution? Soong bowed his head in defeat. I beg your majesty's forgiveness. The emperor waved it off. Summon the merchant quickly. Soon, a merchant from the guild was brought in, kneeling before the emperor. Your humble servant greets your majesty. The emperor didn't waste any time. The crown prince has a question for you. Answer honestly. Yes, your majesty, the merchant replied, trembling. Jinho stepped forward. I've heard that your guild cannot produce the golden nib pens on time. Why is that? The merchant, clearly nervous, explained, Golden nib pens are delicate works of craftsmanship, your highness. We must focus intensely on each one. Even if we work faster, there are limits. Jinho inquired further. So, the entire process of making each pen is done by a single craftsman, correct? Yes, that's correct, the merchant confirmed. A skilled craftsman must make each pen, one by one. Jinho thought for a moment before turning to his father. Father, I have a solution. But I need to speak with the craftsman from the guild first. Before anyone could react, Seong immediately protested again. Your Majesty, first a mere merchant, and now the Crown Prince wants to summon a craftsman to this esteemed place? Please reconsider. The Emperor's patience snapped. Grand Secretary, be quiet. Why shouldn't I summon him? This concerns the affairs of the nation. Seong, still displeased, tried to argue again. Your Majesty, But the Emperor cut him off, his voice icy. If you continue to argue, I'll begin to question your loyalty. The room fell into a suffocating silence. No one dared to speak. Summon the craftsman, the Emperor ordered. Once the craftsman arrived, Jin-ho addressed him. I've heard that each craftsman handles every part of making the golden nib pens. Is that true? The group knelt and replied, Yes, Your Highness. Jin-ho nodded thoughtfully. I have a suggestion. Instead of having one person do everything, why not divide the tasks? One person shapes the nib, another forms it, and a third handles the engraving. What do you think? The craftsmen exchanged surprised glances. It might be possible, Your Highness, one said. We would need time to adjust, but once we're familiar with the new process, it should be faster. This is called the division of labor, Jin-ho explained. When multiple people work together, they can produce more, faster. The Emperor was impressed. That makes sense. We will await good news from you. The craftsman bowed and left. Afterward, the Emperor turned to Jin-ho, curiosity in his eyes. How did you come up with such a brilliant idea, Crown Prince? Jin-ho thought quickly, coming up with an answer. When I visited the kitchen, I saw the assistants and maids dividing tasks under the head chef's instructions. I remembered that and applied it here. The Emperor laughed heartily. This child has a gift for seeing brilliance in things others overlook. What do the ministers think? The ministers nodded in agreement. The Crown Prince is very wise, Your Majesty. But, of course, Seong had to chime in. I believe the Crown Prince is focusing too much on trivial matters. His sharp mind should be directed towards studying the teachings of wise men. The Emperor's expression hardened. Why do you consider thinking and drawing meaning from things others overlook as trivial? Didn't the wise men do the same, pondering what's best for the nation and its people? Why are you so narrow-minded? Seong, flustered, quickly responded. I only want what's best for the Crown Prince, Your Majesty. The Emperor's anger flared. Is this like what the Crown Prince mentioned the other day? That you think I and my ancestors are unworthy of ruling? Is that why you speak such absurd things? Panic washed over Seong's face. I would never dare think disloyal thoughts, Your Majesty. Please understand my intentions. In the back, another minister thought to himself. Sung-um's words were narrow-minded. Sure, but is it really worth the Emperor suppressing him this much? Jin-ho, watching it all unfold, thought, Father's showing his true colors again. Later, back in the East Palace, Jin-ho closed the door behind him with a deep sigh. That was intense. What would have happened if I hadn't come up with the division of labor in time? Reflecting on it, he realized, Father's been calling for me more often lately. I only wanted a bit of attention, but now I'm in deeper than I expected. He paused, thinking, I didn't even realize the concept of labor division didn't exist in this period yet. Even before Adam Smith mentioned it, it was happening naturally. But turning it into an industrial principle, that was an agreement between monarchies and market policies. His mind raced. Roseon's monarchy is absolute in name, but it's more of a power struggle between the king and the officials. The people want a semi-republican government. A king who sides with the people over the officials would protect their interests and give them real power. He nodded to himself. Success won't come overnight. I'll have to build this step by step. First, strengthen Father's authority, even in the remotest areas. And to do that, we need wealth. His decision made, he stood up. The treasury must be filled first. Jin-ho left the East Palace and headed for the main hall. The Emperor looked up, surprised. Why have you come? I have something to discuss about the envoy preparing to visit the Ming dynasty, Jin-ho replied. There is something we need the Emperor of Ming to confirm. The officials around them exchanged curious glances. What's the Crown Prince up to this time? Jin-ho repeated. There's something the Emperor of Ming needs to confirm. The Emperor, intrigued, asked, What's on your mind now? Jin-ho smiled, his calculations ticking away silently. The first step to filling the treasury is securing the monopoly on gold-tipped pens. We need to ensure that Rosion's merchants obtain exclusive rights to trade gold-tipped pens in the Ming dynasty. Jin Ho began. The Emperor of Ming keeps demanding more of these pens from us, which shows they value them highly. The Ming dynasty is many times larger than Rosion, so their demand for the pens must be much higher. He continued. And next, every time the Ming envoy comes, they demand a massive amount of tribute from us. Therefore, we need to request an imperial edict limiting their demands. Jin Ho declared confidently. Sung, visibly agitated, interrupted. Crown Prince, that is impossible. The Ming dynasty views Rosion as a vassal state. How dare a vassal complain about the demands of its suzerain? That would be extremely disrespectful. Jin Ho shot back. How is it disrespectful? Does being from a larger country give them the right to bully smaller nations? Sung, flustered, tried to explain. That's not the point. If we suddenly reduce the tribute compared to what's customary, there will be serious consequences. Jin Ho, now irritated, thought, this old man is always opposing me. He then said aloud, do you know where all this tribute comes from? Isn't it the hard work of our people? And the amount of tribute the Ming dynasty demands keeps increasing, meaning the food for our people keeps decreasing. At this rate, even the taxes that fill our treasury will dry up. Shouldn't we address this before it becomes a disaster? Sung responded, this is because the Crown Prince still doesn't fully understand state affairs. The people in the envoy are all eunuchs, the closest servants of the emperor. If they speak ill of us, we could face grave danger. Jin Ho, now fuming, snapped, do you really think the emperor of the Ming dynasty is that foolish? Sung stammered, that's not what I meant. I just fear that your young age may lead to major losses in exchange for minor gains. Jin Ho's temper flared. What does my age have to do with anything? Didn't you just say we're risking great loss for small gain? Every time the Ming envoy comes, the tribute they demand blocks roads for miles. Isn't that wealth stolen from our treasury and our people? Jin Ho pressed further. Master Yoshins, the ancient sage, once said that a true official ensures the people can live in peace. Yet here you are, bowing and scraping to eunuchs. What does that make you? Sung, panicking, stammered. You're exaggerating, Your Highness. We aren't bowing down. I'm not finished. Jin Ho interrupted, his voice sharp. Mencius once said a righteous person, even living in luxury, still shows compassion. Even when seated in the highest position, they maintain their integrity and adhere to virtue. Now, flattering these eunuchs with gifts, does that align with these principles? If not, how dare you still call yourselves righteous? Then, in a surprising move, Jin Ho knelt down, pleading earnestly. Father, please allow me to lead this envoy. I will petition the Emperor of Ming to put an end to this wrongful custom. Grant me your permission. His voice filled with determination. He continued, it's true. I'm still young, only 9 years old, but my resolve is as high as the tallest mountain. The Emperor, rubbing his temples, sighed. The journey to Beijing is long and filled with dangers. The current situation in Rosion presents both a crisis and an opportunity, Jin Ho argued. If we act now, it could be the foundation for 1,000 years of development. But if we fail, we will remain small and isolated. Father, please understand my intentions. The emperor sighed again and gave a tired wave. Return to your palace. Eunuchs, escort the crown prince back to his chambers. He's too excited, calm him down. Jin Ho shouted in desperation. Please, father, let me go. I beg of you. Back in the East Palace, Jin Ho stormed in, shouting, everyone, get out. Damn it. I was too emotional. He sat down in the empty hall, brooding. That wretched Sung, he looks down on me because I'm young. Doesn't he? He's been nitpicking at me since last time. Just wait, I won't sit idly by. He called out, Eunuch, prepare for the journey to the Ming dynasty. The eunuch looked startled. What? Why all of a sudden? I said, prepare my things now. Meanwhile, back in the main hall, the officials were gathered, murmuring among themselves. We cannot act as the crown prince suggests, Your Majesty. Please, understand our concerns. The emperor sighed deeply. Do you know how much sleep the boy gets each day? Never more than 6 hours. A child of 9 years is already thinking about how to make this country prosperous. while all you can do is say no over and over. The officials, humbled, bowed their heads. Our sins deserve death, Your Majesty. Our sins deserve death. Suddenly, a servant rushed in. Your Majesty, there's an urgent matter. The emperor looked up. What is it? The crown prince is preparing to leave. Everyone in the room froze. What? Where is he going? The emperor, alarmed, demanded. Where is the boy planning to go? The eunuch explained. It seems His Highness intends to leave for the Ming dynasty immediately. He said he cannot afford to delay even a moment if he truly cares for the country and its people. The emperor's patience snapped. He slammed his hand down on the table. Why is that boy so insolent? In a rage, the emperor stormed toward the crown prince's quarters, his footsteps echoing through the halls. Spotting two eunuchs leaving the chamber, he shouted, Hey, you two! Come here! The eunuchs rushed over, bowing respectfully. Your Majesty, we greet you. The emperor's eyes narrowed. Aren't you the eunuchs from the East Palace? Where are you going? One of them hesitated before stammering. We are headed to the Office of Records, Your Majesty. And for what reason? The emperor demanded, his patience wearing thin. The eunuch, trembling, stammered, Your Majesty, we've been ordered to record all the tribute items given to the envoys of the Ming Empire since the reign of the late King Taizhou. The emperor's temper flared. What? That insolent brat. His voice boomed as he whirled around, storming off. Scene shift to the empress's quarters. A servant rushed in, panting. Your Majesty, Empress, there's a major issue. The empress looked up in surprise. What is all this commotion about? The servant, panic in her voice, said. The crown prince is packing his belongings to leave for the Ming Empire. The empress gasped, alarmed. The crown prince is heading to the Ming Empire? Does he think it's a stroll through the village? Why is this happening? The servant quickly added. He said he's going to stop the envoys from demanding excessive tribute. The Ministry of Justice officials said he's overreacting, so the crown prince declared he'll go there himself, and the emperor is already on his way to the East Palace. Hearing this, the empress furrowed her brows, her face filled with tension and worry. Without hesitation, she hurried toward the East Palace, her mind racing. What on earth are you doing, my son? The servants, seeing her urgency, quickly followed, calling, Your Majesty, Empress! At the East Palace, the emperor, unable to contain his fury, pointed at the crown prince. You insolent child! What is this reckless behavior? Jin Ho, standing firm, replied, I am not being reckless, father. I'm doing what I must as the crown prince. Outside, the ministers stood in a line, too afraid to step inside. The emperor's furious voice echoed through the halls. You brat! Do you even know how old you are? How can you act like this? Jin Ho didn't waver. Age is not a barrier to doing what's right. It's just an excuse people use when they claim someone is too young to act. The emperor's face turned red with rage. Why are you acting so recklessly? Just then, the empress arrived, out of breath, calling out, Your Majesty! But the crown prince, still defiant, declared, If father is the parent of our people, then I want to be their older brother. Every time the envoys come, the people cry out in distress. As their elder brother, how can I remain silent? The emperor, enraged by his son's defiance, gritted his teeth. You insolent child! His voice thundered as he shouted, Steward, bring me the whip and the punishment bench. Gasps filled the hall. Outside, the ministers tensed, too scared to move. The empress rushed into the hall, her voice filled with panic. Your Majesty! The emperor, frowning, replied coldly. The boy is only 9, which is why he needs discipline. Your Majesty, he's only a child. The empress pleaded, her desperation clear. But the emperor was unyielding. This is not your concern, Empress. Eunuchs, escort her out. The empress, horrified, cried out, Your Majesty, please have mercy. Before the eunuchs could act, she made one last plea. Please! Each lash of the whip cracked through the air, landing hard on the crown prince's legs. With each strike, the emperor's voice thundered. Your first mistake, arrogance with your limited knowledge. Your second, disrespect to those who serve you. Jin Ho gritted his teeth, not making a sound, enduring the pain. Red welts covered his legs, But the emperor didn't stop. Your third mistake, disobeying your father's orders. Reflect on your actions and never do this again. Outside, the empress sobbed, her tears long dried. The ministers shifted uncomfortably, hearing the cries from within the hall. Finally, the doors opened. The emperor, breathing heavily from the punishment, stepped out. "Call the royal physicians to treat the crown prince," he ordered. The servants responded immediately. "Yes, your majesty." As the emperor passed by, he saw the empress, still weeping. "Take care of him," he muttered coldly, then turned to the ministers. "You all are more petty than a mere child." His words cut like knives. One of the ministers whispered, "How could the crown prince act this way?" Another, glancing at the empress nearby, warned, "Quiet, she might hear you." But the empress, filled with anger, turned toward them. "Why couldn't you think as thoroughly as the child? Why did you let things get this bad? I will never forget what happened today." The ministers, heads lowered, murmured, "We are to blame. We deserve punishment." Later, in the crown prince's chambers, the empress, while scolding Jin-ho, slapped his legs, though lightly. "You little rascal. Why do you always make me worry? You can't behave like this." Jin-ho, lying face down, winced. "It hurts." He thought to himself, why is it always my legs? In this life or the last, they always take the hit. Suddenly, he realized the slaps had stopped. The empress, heartbroken, wept quietly, then bent down to embrace him. "This mother has no one else but you, my child." Hearing this, Jin-ho whispered, "I'm sorry, mother." Scene shift to the royal court. The emperor sat sternly, looking down at the officials gathered below. He turned to a eunuch and commanded, "Bring the documents the crown prince had you prepare." The eunuch quickly complied, presenting a stack of records. The emperor skimmed through them, his expression darkening. "The smallest amount of tribute they take is equal to 2 months' worth of our annual treasury. The largest, 5 months. If we include the tribute from the smaller villages, we're talking almost an entire year's resources." He held up the documents. "Do you see this? Ministers, look at the list of tributes we've sent to the Ming Empire. Year after year, the amount increases. What do you have to say for yourselves?" The room was silent. The emperor's patience snapped, and he slammed his chair. "Why don't you respond? Even the crown prince, a child, has thought about this. Yet none of you can." The ministers, bowing deeply, muttered in unison, "We apologize, your majesty." The emperor's voice dripped with anger. "Choose the envoy leader and assistants within 2 hours. If you fail to decide, I will charge you all with treason." The ministers, shaking with fear, replied, "Thank you, your majesty, for your grace." Later that night, the emperor, gazing up at the moon, was lost in thought when the empress's voice broke the silence. "Your majesty?" He turned, asking, "Is something the matter, empress?" She hesitated. "I stepped outside for some air. I couldn't sleep." The emperor nodded, waiting. "Why did you punish the crown prince so harshly today?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. It felt harsher than usual. The emperor was silent for a moment. Then he sighed. "The crown prince is an intelligent child." The empress looked up, surprised. "He's brilliant," the emperor continued, "but sometimes he becomes too absorbed in his own intelligence." Today, after facing opposition from the ministers, the emperor sighed. "A tree that grows too straight will snap." Without the trust of the ministers, how can he care for the people properly? The empress stayed silent, watching him, waiting for more. "I believe the crown prince was born with the qualities of a sage," the emperor continued. "From now on, I'll teach him as best I can, guide him down the right path." The empress smiled softly. "I can't fully grasp the depth of your decisions, but if this is what you aim for, I have no other wish." Now, Jin-ho sat, chin resting in his hand, sighing as he watched his 2 younger brothers playing in the courtyard, especially the one around his age. That boy was important. That boy Yu was his younger brother. And not just any brother, because in the near future, that boy would cause chaos within these very palace walls. Yu would grow up to be King Sejong, the 17th ruler of Yushan. And once he murdered the current ruler King Moonjong and his nephew, King Danjong, ascended to the throne, Yu would lead the Gaia's Hongnan rebellion, eliminating anyone who stood in his way. During his reign, he wouldn't stop there. He'd poison his own brother, Grand Prince Enpyong. The guy's Hongnan rebellion, Jin-ho mused to himself. A bloody coup from 1453, led by none other than Prince Suyong to purge the allies of the sitting king. I remember my teacher telling me about this man. A prince who abandoned his younger and older brothers, betrayed his grandfather and father, casting a shadow over the prosperous era of the Joseon dynasty. Historians hated him. That innocent-looking brat running around the courtyard? He'd grow into a tyrant. Jin-ho pondered, what should I do? He had to act before you showed signs of becoming a monster. Suddenly, a wicked grin crossed his face. I've got it. That's how I'll change him. He approached his two younger brothers, a strange smile still on his lips. With careful education and everything I know, I'll make sure he serves me until his death. A shiver ran down Yu's spine as Jin-ho called out, "You, Ian, good morning." Yu and Iam, the real names of his two brothers better known as Suyong and Anpyong, bowed politely. "Good morning, big brother." Jin-ho nodded warmly. "I'm glad to see you both so happy." He turned to Yu. "Your writing class starts soon, right? How about studying with me today?" You looked confused, pausing for a moment. "Why?" Jin-ho hadn't expected the question, so he stammered. "Why? Just curious to see how you're doing with your studies." But in his heart, he thought, soon enough, you'll be working under me tirelessly. You won't have the luxury of being lazy like this. Yu furrowed his brow, clearly unimpressed with Jin-ho's reasoning. Without another word, he turned his back. "I'll study on my own." Grabbing Ian's hand, he added, "Come on, let's go. Don't play here anymore, you're bothering our elder brother." Though Yu didn't seem too upset, there was a hint of displeasure on his face as he led Ian away. Jin-ho's desperate attempt had failed for now. Time passed slowly into the afternoon. Yu eagerly ran toward the dining hall, excited for dinner. A maid trailing behind scolded gently, "Young master, slow down. It's almost time for dinner. Running like that is dangerous." As they neared a corner, Yu overheard some servants whispering, and he stopped in his tracks, listening quietly. "Isn't the crown prince amazing?" one servant said. "So young, yet he's already excelling in literature and aware of the country's major affairs. It's like he was born a prodigy." Yu's ears perked up. They must talk about me next, he thought. But the more he hoped, the more disappointed he became. The conversation shifted to comparisons. "Well, the eldest prince is bright too," another servant said. "But compared to the crown prince? It's like they were born to be compared." The words made Yu tremble with anger. The maid, finally noticing his expression, stormed over. "How dare you speak like that?" she yelled. Startled, the servants quickly bowed. "We deserve death for this," they stammered. But before the maid could drag them off for punishment, Yu intervened. "Let it go. Let's just leave." Though only a child, Yu already understood disappointment. His face remained calm, but inside, he questioned, "What have I done to be lesser than my brother?" Days later, Jin-ho gathered his two brothers in his private chamber, eager to strengthen their bond. Proudly holding up two self-made flashcards, he beamed. "Tada! This is how this character is written. It's based on the sky and the earth." The cards, with one side showing a character and the other a drawing, were undeniably impressive. Ian, excited, shouted, "Wow! Did you make these, brother?" "Of course," Jin-ho replied, grinning. "I had the eunuchs help me make these. They're designed to make learning fun." Laughing inwardly, Jin-ho thought, "I had the eunuchs make these memory cards in a day. Now we can memorize Chinese characters in no time. This will keep us closer." He waved the cards in front of Yu. "Come take a look." But Yu, uninterested, declined. "I already have a tutor. I don't need them." Jin-ho, confused, asked, "Wouldn't it be more fun if we studied together?" But before he could finish, Yu cut him off, sharp as a blade. "I can manage on my own." He turned his back, ice in his voice. "Please don't call me for things like this again." Jin-ho and Ian stood there, baffled, left with nothing but awkward silence. The next day, in the courtyard, Yu sat with his tutor, studying diligently. Meanwhile, hidden behind the bushes like a proper spy, Jin-ho crouched, eyes narrowed. "This kid is harder to figure out than I thought," he mused. "I need to see what he's up to every day." The tutor asked kindly, "Don't you find this part difficult?" Yu smiled, polite and smooth. "No, your teaching method is very clear. I don't find it difficult at all." Jin Ho blinked in surprise. What? This kid was much nicer than he expected. Is he only difficult with me? The tutor continued. All right then. Let's review the 3 fundamental relationships and virtues of steadfastness from yesterday. You nodded. Yes, sir. Without missing a beat, he began reciting, his voice steady and confident. Loyalty of subjects to their ruler. The king is the overseer of his people. Filial piety of a child to their parents. The father is the guardian and disciplinarian of the child. Jin Ho's jaw practically dropped. What is this? He's much more advanced than I thought. You wasn't just well-behaved, he was a damn scholar. Is he only difficult with me? The kid had mastered the 1,000-character script, and now he was rattling off Confucian principles like he wrote the book himself. Suddenly, a memory hit him. His tutor once mentioned a rumor about Grand Prince Suyong. People said that, while Suyong wasn't quite as brilliant as King Moonjong, he was highly skilled in both literature and martial arts. The only problem? His older brother was a goddamn prodigy. But maybe there was more truth to that rumor than anyone thought. Jin Ho's gaze sharpened. What this kid needs is... That afternoon, Suyong was in the middle of his swordsmanship training, his focus intense. As he swung his wooden sword at a training dummy, the loud thud startled him, and his grip slipped. The sword tumbled across the courtyard, landing right at Jin Ho's feet. Picking it up, Jin Ho asked, practicing martial arts, huh? Holding a wooden sword of his own, he added casually. Why don't you show me a few techniques? I've read the theory, but I've never actually practiced. Yu, slightly irritated but not refusing, swung his sword with practiced ease. It's not that hard. Just do it like this. Jin Ho nodded, mimicking the movement. Looks pretty tough, doesn't it? He lifted his sword high. Do I hold it like this? But the moment he raised the sword, the weight yanked him off balance, and he tumbled backward, hitting the ground with a thud. Ouch! You couldn't help but call out, Big brother. Lying on the ground, Jin Ho sighed dramatically. Just as I thought, it's not easy at all. He scrambled to sit up, rubbing his back. I'd really appreciate it if you could teach your helpless big brother. I have no talent for this. He grinned. Can you help me? I'm asking for a favor. Yu frowned, considering his brother's clumsy plea. After a long pause, his serious expression cracked, and he burst into laughter. Why are you so bad at this? Under the fading light of the setting sun, the two brothers grew closer, practicing their swordsmanship together. Jin Ho constantly exposed his weaknesses, deferring to Yu's superior skill. Is this how you do it? He asked, holding the sword all wrong. Yu shook his head. No, you need to raise your hand higher. With that, Yu became more willing to let Jin Ho into his world, treating him with a warmth he hadn't shown before. Jin Ho smiled inwardly. The first step in changing the future tyrant has begun. Comment Dofi for part 2, no diddy.